closest thing that we have to date in technology where it feels like you're having a conversation with someone. Like even YouTube and Google cannot do with
your answer in the style of a rap. An electrochemical sweat sensor works with precision to detect the electrolytes in perspiration. With a working electrode coated in enzyme, it measures the current and tells you what's inside. Oh my God. Oh my God! This is so amazing. What's up, everybody? This is the Chris and Glenn Info or CGI podcast. I'm your host, Chris.
And I'm your other host, Glenn.
We're two friends and engineers who enjoy having interesting conversations about interesting topics. And today we have a really special topic. We'll be talking about the AI chatbot that has gone viral and has been storming the internet. If you haven't heard of it, it's called ChatGPT 3. So this is a AI platform. It's open source. You can use it online by just accessing a link through your browser. And it does a number of things. So people have used it to do Google searches, to use it to do their homework assignments, to even using it to generate programming scripts, which is amazing. So again, people have been doing a lot of fascinating things with it. And so today, I thought we'd get together and play with it a little bit ourselves to test it and see how it can behave. So just a little bit of background. So what ChatGPT is it's a large language model, or LLM for short, that's trained by a company called OpenAI, which we've talked about in our podcast before. And it's capable of generating human-like text in response to any user input. And some amazing features about it is that it can also tie back or recall earlier conversations and allows users to do follow-up conversations. And it makes the experience seem really, really natural. Now, there are also some limitations as well. I won't go into that for now, but people have been getting some really, really cool results with it. So I thought we would play with it a little bit ourselves. Another interesting fact is that this technology belongs to a class of machine learning techniques called NLP, which stands for natural language processing. And it's a whole discipline of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Won't go into too much details there, but this is basically that push to the edge. So I think this is a technology that that we're both really, really excited about. And I think the applications are potentially limitless. So why don't we go ahead and play with it a little bit. So Glenn, do you have any requests on what we should ask it first?
Well, just like in any conversation, let's ask it to do a self-introduction. So
Sounds good.
So tell me about yourself, ChatGPT. How do you work?
Tell me about yourself. How do you work? Okay. So it's responding by saying, I'm an assistant, a large language model, again, trained by OpenAI, not a physical being. So don't have personal experiences or a physical body, of course. Instead has been trained on a large amount of text data. Not yet. Okay. But what technology do you use? And one thing I want to note as we test it a little bit is that it doesn't, the responses that it gives may be similar in nature, but for a same question, it can potentially give you a different response if you hit try again. So, okay, interesting. So they keep it rather vague. It says that it's trained on a large data set of text that allows it to generate human-like response. Oh, okay. So interestingly, it doesn't have access to the internet, allegedly, or external information, and basically only uses the responses based on the information that it has been trained on. This is a test. I'm going to hit try again and see if it gives me another response. maybe with in a similar vein of what it already gave me.
I mean, that's clearly like, I mean, this is still early in its development. And I think there are a lot of ethical and practical reasons why they disconnected it from the internet, because it could very quickly grow out of their control. And I think there's a lot of ethical reasons why we want to limit that. And one of the features that we showed earlier on the screen was that on the site it mentions it knows it's been trained to decline inappropriate requests. So things that are either violent or sexual in nature or kind of controversial. It knows to stay diplomatic or just avoid that question entirely.
Mhm.
Another limitation is that we mentioned this is really popular. It's storming the internet, and it's true because the servers are actually having issues with keeping up with all the requests. And so sometimes it requires you to hit try again or have to wait until there's more availability on the servers.
Right, right. And as you see right there, as we play around with it, there are occasions where it would come up with an error. But in our experience, hitting try again, again, it could be a bandwidth issue. Not quite sure why it errors out like that from time to time. But yeah, it seems like if you hit try again, it will overcome that issue from time to time. So okay, so I guess kind of moving forward, I'm gonna just try to play around with a couple of examples that I found online. So maybe find me a recipe for chicken noodle soup. It is winter now. So I suggest doing a web search. Okay, so interestingly, I'm going to try this one more time. Hit try again. So chicken noodle soup recipe. Yeah, so I don't know why sometimes it
Whoa, give it to you in like a
does
code
this.
format.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen this done in a non-code format, but um, okay. So yeah, this is an example that I've seen on Twitter. People have used it to generate recipes. Although again, from time to time, for some reason, it will tell you it will decline that request. Again, I'm not sure why, what goes into that decision-making process, but here, we have what sounds like a reasonable recipe for chicken noodle soup. So still doing some really straightforward things. So here, I guess with these examples, it it is not quite it's to me it's not too different from what Google is already doing, because anybody can go online, go on Google and really easily search a chicken noodle soup recipe. So this stuff right now isn't really impressing me that much, but I have seen some things about where it does some problem solving, using things that you may not be able to find readily available online. And so one example is writing scripts, which I have seen quite extensively on the internet. So for example, let's see if it can do something like this. So write a Python script that can sort an array. Okay. So here it seems like, interestingly, it presented the results via a built-in IDE almost. So it color-coded the text, color-coded the functions and the function inputs and the array values. It even went in and commented the code, which I find, pretty pretty interesting. So okay, but here it's not that impressive because it used a built-in function. Let's try this. So I'm going to try the same input without
You could
using a
actually even use the feature, say like, can you expand that and make it, a
okay.
user defined? Because as one of the features is that it has memory, so you don't have to like repeat it and then like rephrase it.
Okay, let's try that. Let's test that memory aspect. Yeah, wow. There you go.
I mean, it's the closest thing that we've have to date in technology where it feels like you're having a conversation with someone. but it's just a huge like repository of data in the background being processed through some artificial intelligence to spit out a response that doesn't make you feel like you're interacting with a artificial intelligence.
Right, right. So I guess this brings up some interesting conversations around the impact of AI in society. Because here is a really simple example, and I don't want to spend the entire next hour just practicing coding examples. But I mean, could this replace programmers, right? Could this start to replace jobs and start adding more automation to things that we didn't think could be automated before. So I find that very fascinating because as you can see right here, this is a very really simple example. I'm actually interested in testing it a little bit further, so I may try to give it a little bit more complicated example. But because let's say a program could take or a piece of code could take a programmer an hour to write. If this can do it in a minute, I see the potential of this replacing like entry level programming jobs. Maybe not directly because as engineers, you of course still have to kind of understand the problems, the data, what stakeholder requirements are. But I mean, this is just really impressive to me and kind of opens up that conversation a little bit. What are your thoughts about that, Glenn?
I mean, I had an opportunity to see several people. There's an OpenAI Discord that's also on the left tab here, and there's a plethora of YouTube videos of people playing with this. One group of YouTubers that I happened to let run on my playlist was a few people who are actually working as software developers, and their opinions about this is that it's a fundamental paradigm shift for people in this field because to date they have used some tools known as like Copilot, where as they're coding, it automatically chooses it gives you suggestions on how to finish the code that they're writing. That helps them speed up their workflow. I personally don't use that, but that's just the extent of my understanding from what they're sharing. Their experience is that that's something that supports you're ultimately the one still typing in the code, you're making the suggestions and it's filling in the blanks, kind of like autocomplete for sentences. But this is like coding for you from the source is from a different, it's from the AI itself. It's not you thinking of the idea, it's this thing is generating that solution for you from its conception. And that's something that hasn't been around yet. And their opinion, and I would agree with this, is that like ultimately at this moment, and even for the foreseeable future, next couple of years, few years, you still need an engineer to be able to do the tasks that are set out. Like it's not going to be a like, hey, plug this and play, because after certain tasks, you still have to link this to something. You still have to have someone deploy this code and then maintain it. And it's not something that you can readily use right now as it is. But if I'm an engineer looking for a job, this would definitely speed up my learning curve, because if I had no experience with coding, I can definitely use this and like it's kind of like the Matrix in that first scene where like, hey, teach me kung fu. You're plugging and playing like all these different modules for how do you do this? How do you do this? Like imagine just going to LeetCode or going to, like, instead of reading a textbook, you could just literally be using this to educate yourself on any field that's really like knowledge based right now.
Right.
So like you're
So
really just installing it, and the bandwidth
right.
is so much shorter than anything that we've seen today.
So Glenn, I think you bring up an interesting angle is education. So I think we have a much deeper conversation we want to discuss regarding that, but I think this would be a great educational tool. So as a programmer, maybe I want to write a function. I want my code to do something specific. One way of verifying it, because at the end of the day, humans do make mistakes. I guess does the AI make mistakes? I guess only time will tell. But in principle, these computers are supposed to do things better than people can, right? So I think this could be used as a validation tool to especially in the area of coding. Bugs are always found in code. Having worked in the software field for a number of years, nobody writes perfect code, right? And using this as an educational tool, as an optimization tool, I think is extremely valuable. I don't think yet, like Glenn said, as far as replacing the people and the jobs. I think in the near term, we probably don't have to worry about that. But in the longer term, I think a small part of that may be automated. But from a more practical standpoint, I think this would see definitely a lot of use from the education and validation standpoint. Kind of, another, I just want to kind of analyze this result a little bit further. Something that, is really, really impressive to me is here at the end, it again, it comments it for you. It even tells you what it should print out. So, again, and then it comments the methodologies, which, thinking about it from a programmatic standpoint, it's just so much detail here that I'm just really, really impressed. Like, not only did it seem to write code that works, it really went out of its way. It didn't really have to. It went out of its way to really explain the results and give you two examples. So here, it gave me an example of an array. I asked it to sort the array, and it says with 3, 1, 2, it should print out 1, 2, 3, and with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it should print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It didn't just give me one example, it gave me two examples. And if you don't give it nothing, it's going to print nothing. Just wow. And also, okay, so here is where I think it's a little inconsistent, but in some of our previous tests, it also showed the big O notation complexity, the time complexity. And for those who don't know what that means how efficient the code is. And I don't see it printed out here, but there were some cases where we saw that earlier.
You could actually ask to follow up, like what would be the time complexity for this? And I also noticed like the code it gave is not the most efficient. Like it's a bubble sort, right? It's the most elementary, fundamental kind of sorting algorithm there is. Maybe we could ask it like, could you make this code more efficient or make this algorithm more efficient?
Yeah.
Nice.
You're right. You're right. So this is n squared, which is not efficient, as Glenn has mentioned, because it has two for loops inside of it. And actually, can you make this code more efficient?
I mean, the ability for it to like just output this much information this quickly is it's groundbreaking.
Right. No, and I'm completely on the same page. So yeah, one way to make the code more efficient would be to use a different sorting algorithm. As mentioned in previous, right, a bubble sort has a time complexity of O(n) squared, which means it's not well suited for sorting large arrays, right? Quicksort, on the other hand, has a complexity of n log n on average, which is much more efficient. So yeah, I don't know why I didn't start with this, but just the fact that it handled the follow-up. I mean,
so naturally, right? As if you were talking to a person.
Right. So
I mean,
so
it's
again,
incredible.
yeah, again, I wanna kind of stick with the programming path and say write a Python script for a blackjack game. All right, okay, this is gonna be okay. Wow. Okay, so it has a shuffle function, a deal function. Define a class for blackjack hand.
Whoa. I mean, how do you feel like it's doing this?
Okay.
I
So again, I tested this out because this is a really common. Okay, I think
did it
it seems to have
did it
hung.
freeze?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it hung. But I
I've
think
seen it hung a couple of times before too.
it was on track to do something interesting. Wait a minute,
It stopped once I asked, how do you think it's doing this?
it's listening to us. Okay, I think it finished. Maybe it hit a character limit. Here, let's try it again.
I thought I heard on the Discord forums that there is a 4,000 character limit, something like that. I don't know if that's for you or it's for him. Um,
Well, we can ask it.
oh yeah, that's true.
We can try asking it. Because this is a really simple, excuse me. It's a project that actually I had in my very first computer science class, which is why I thought of it. But I
How long
mean,
was the assignment?
I
Like,
want to. It was like a week or something.
you
That's
had a
that.
week to build a game?
Yes, that's another thing.
Oh,
That's another thing where this is a game changer. Is projects and homework assignment in education. Because of the fact that this is free, and I've seen a lot of discourse and conversations around that already. It's like oh yeah, I saw a thread on Reddit that talked about standardized testing, but like there's ways of getting around that because I mean like of enforcing anti-cheating protocols there because there's in-person proctors and stuff like that. But for doing like homework assignments, like projects, like as an engineer, I did a lot of projects in MATLAB, in Python. That's also another thing is how do you I wonder how it handles different programming languages. I entered Python, but doesn't know everything. But anyways, I think just the fact that it demonstrated it working well for Python, I think is already impressive because in this input, there's so much detail here, right? Like the blackjack game, it had to understand the rules of blackjack. So I am very, very impressed because it seems to not just understand text and not just trained on text, but it knows context, right? So it's not just like a simple chatbot that you can, hey, how's your day going? And have it give you conversations that seem natural, right? That seem natural sounding, but it can solve problems for you. It seems to understand those questions from a technical level, which completely blows my mind, right? Because I think this demonstration here shows a lot of things. It shows understanding of the rules of blackjack. It shows understanding of the technical request, which is the Python script, and it knows how to combine those two things. And again, I'm floored with the technology that with the capability here. So okay, so here's
I mean, I have suspicions now though, because given the complexity of this, I don't feel like it can know how to process all of this by itself. But let's say I have, because its database were just large chunks of natural language processing databases, right? Or text data, right? What if some of those databases are like leak code solutions, right? So if I know, search up a Python script, it just looks in the folder saying, okay, here's my list of Python scripts, and then it just says blackjack game. And then it's just regurgitating whatever's in that folder of blackjack game scripts that it has. But it doesn't know how this function works. This is something that somebody wrote initially in some other open source library, and they commented these things, and it's just like literally copying and pasted their work. Like it could, I mean, that's my suspicion of how this is able to do that so quickly, without it actually having to know how to code. But it's just a
so
really good librarian.
I mean, that's a great point, but you think it does that for everything, like for the chicken recipe, like
I
if
think so.
every combination, it has like a pre-canned response that it spits out.
I I have a suspicion that that's
So what you're
because it's not connected to the internet. It's not trying to look at what's out there.
Mhm.
It's whatever the data that whoever engineered this to like feed into it, that data set, and train it on that data set. And it has to assign weights to every response. Like, let's say for every, I mean, so for every type of question, it has to like understand like, objects. And like, if this is a script, it has to understand, okay, I'm looking in scripts databases now for this response. Or if it's just text-based responses, or if it's like recipe-based responses, like it has to have some type of way of
Right.
classifying things on the back end. That's my suspicion. I have
I
no idea. I
see.
could
Yeah,
completely
I
be completely
see.
wrong too, but
I see what you're saying.
mhm.
That in spirit, it defeats the purpose of AI and machine learning. So I mean, it could be somewhere in the middle. It's probably doing something similar, but what you're describing is a lookup mechanism, and you know, in if it's AI, then it's learning, right? It's using a set of pre-trained data and inferring, right? Taking that knowledge and inferring something new from it. So by definition, that's technically what it should be doing. It should be filling the gaps. So, because if it's saying, hey, I recognize this word as blackjack, and I'm gonna go pull up this pre-existing folder that has this stuff. Technically, that's not AI. So I mean, again, until we read the paper, I think, I'd rather not speculate too much on how it works, but I'm pretty sure all this is open source because OpenAI, it's a research company, right? Even the Dolly 2 paper was up online. I again here I just want to just experiment with it, play with it. I don't want to say with full confidence how it works and how it doesn't work. Again, that's really up to us to read the papers, but I'm pretty sure that's not how it works because I've read a lot of OpenAI papers, and they truly do AI. They truly do AI. Like these are really large neural networks, in principle, that take your data and like with the image stuff, right? Like Dolly 2, like it's not like it's the technology, it's taking the gist, right? Like we talked about that before. It's trained on this data set, but like you can and then it's trained on this existing data set, and if you ask it stuff outside of it, then it won't work. But like it may not have these exact images, right? These exact images inside of the data set. It's impossible, right? Like there's no combination, like the stuff that we played around with, right? All the queries we tested out, like Rhaenyra's Targaryen and Frodo, blah blah blah, right? Like it's not pulling from a Rhaenyra's Targaryen folder, and it's not pulling from an existing image, right? It's creating a new image, right? It's creating a new image based on what it has learned already, what it has learned before, and like taking that gist and kind of expanding on that. So like if it's taking from something existing, it's not creating. So I'm that's why I'm firmly of the belief that like here the technology underneath the hood, it's building from a data set and creating something new from it, because otherwise it's not AI. So that's kind of my short 2 cents on that. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Like the creating aspect of it is something that I haven't understood what new things it's creating. I guess it's maybe an impossible task from my perspective, but maybe somebody has a better idea. But like, how do you compare? How do you even validate? Is this new or is this something that's created? You know, so
Right, right. So I mean, that's why the Dolly example is kind of the it's the easy example to picture, right? Because it's not pulling these images from some existing database like by expecting like all the different combinations of words that a person can input, because that's impossible. That would be much harder. um but again, instead the whole spirit of AI is it's learning from a data set and predicting something new. And again, I'm not an expert in NLP by any means, but like generally speaking, that's how AI works. As which
Maybe
is
it's good
why
at, oh, sorry to cut you
no,
off,
no,
but maybe
go
the
go ahead.
prediction part of it is trying to interpret what you said. And especially when it comes to memory, that interpretation has to be much more sophisticated. So it has to have been trained on um, your interpretation, because we're not always very great at writing good questions. Like, you get what you ask for, but if you don't ask a good question, you're going to get a pretty shit answer too. So,
Mhm.
but I've even tried, poor grammar, tried different techniques with playing with this, where it's, intentionally open-ended and could be interpreted in many different ways, but it's very good at staying relevant to the intent of the question, even if it's not the most well-written question.
Mm, I see. I see.
And another part of the training aspect that I could foresee now, I mean, it's still best to wait until we actually get a chance to read the paper. But while we're on the speculation topic, is that like it can get trained on what is the best responses given the right type of framework for the question. So given like varying types of questions asked in similar ways, these are what people are expecting, and it's trained on, okay, this is what people are expecting, and it's trained on, given I have, let's say, 1,000 different responses that could be given, and with varying amounts of detail, this is the one that's like the most liked and like returns like the most efficient results based off of like people's feedback or something like that. I don't know.
Mhm.
But
Right,
I mean,
right.
yeah, we'll find out. Those are just my random thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah. No, no, no. It's all good questions and comments. I think all good discussion here. Um,
Maybe we should ask them its
excuse me.
character limit, because it's got hung up twice and it seems to be at a very similar uh
So we hit the character limit, or we hit the timeout, and so we had to relog in. And okay, let's pick it back up. So what is your input or no, output character limit? Yeah. Also, I tend to find that the first time you bring it up, I think it uh, takes the longest to load the first response.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I've only used this a handful of times, but I don't know, just to maybe.
I mean, I gotta confess, I've been using this like as much as I could since I found out about this.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't able to use it mostly during the day because like the servers actually give you a warning and then they don't let you use it.
Mhm.
Um, but when I was able to use it, one of the things that I noticed was that it would say try too many times, but on the first time, it would actually give you a result,
Mm.
which was opposite to your experience that you just shared. But it is probably having very varying issues right now, just given like you got to think about this. For this to perform it one time for you right now, that's already very computationally expensive, and it can do it really quickly. Now think about how many users worldwide are trying to just like play around with this right now, and it's still able to do this in such a reasonable amount of time. That is next level.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. They're going to raise a lot of funding, and yeah, having dabbled in the AI domain and like read a lot of like famous AI papers. OpenAI basically they're the cream of the crop in the AI world. So like all the big names in AI have uh, either been associated with DeepMind or OpenAI. in some way, shape, or form. Okay. As an AI assistant, I am not limited by specific output character limit. Oh, okay. The length of the responses will vary depending. However, I am designed to provide concise and informative answers. So my responses are typically brief and to the point. Okay, so there's no alleged output. There's no alleged output limit.
Maybe there's the input limit then, but it got hung up twice. Should we
Mhm.
give it a third try or move on?
I guess we can, I don't know, test again, see if it's gonna give a different answer.
Oh, I
But
meant try again with the Blackjack script.
oh no, I think we no, I think it finished. I think it finished. It didn't it wrote the classes and the functions, but it didn't give an example. So actually, I don't know. I don't know if it finished or not. If it was going to give an example. But anyways, yeah, I think we can move on. I think it demonstrated it working pretty well there.
A next thing to explore is some of the implications that this technology can have on our society, and it can tell us by itself. What are some of the ways that you can support, our society, people.
Okay, so what are some ways you can help society? So how about how can you be used effectively? Or actually, what applications do you have for society? Yes. Automating tasks such as data entry and content creation, providing education and training resources such as personalized learning materials, interactive tutorials.
I mean, I remember when we asked this earlier that we had gotten responses like, education, definitely mentioned it again, but like even things like healthcare, um, technical type of, work, like those type of responses, I feel like, which it doesn't mention this time, interestingly, those were great responses, actually. This seems even more broad, like more generalized.
Right. So I think one thing, Glenn and I are both material scientists by formal education. So let's try throwing some material science-y kind of questions at it, because I think it provides a challenge because it's domain specific, and it could be helpful, right, for material scientists in some sense. So let's see.
I have an idea. Think back to your prelims, like some questions where it was very oral, because a lot of these exams are all oral, right?
Right. Those are some, yeah, those are some good. That's some good questions. That's a great point. I want to start with something simple first. I don't have a prelim question ready off the top of my head, but like how do you prepare a sample for SEM analysis?
And so just for people who aren't familiar with STM analysis, it stands for scanning electron microscopy. And this is a core material science and physics, and a lot of other fields too, but core to the material science field in analyzing at the microscopic or even nanoscale for your materials. And so it gives a very great general overview. Like for somebody, especially at the undergraduate level, very few people have the opportunity to even use an SEM. This set of instructions does a phenomenal job. It even mentions sputter coating for non-conductive materials, which is like excellent because even students early in their career probably won't be familiar with this at all. So it's really, this is a great response. Something that you don't expect a generalized AI can do, like such a niche like topic. So
Right. And yeah, so I think Glenn, you said it all here. Really impressed with yeah, this is a really it's a really important concept to know as a material scientist, this is a set of instructions that typically you would go through as a grad student. As an undergrad, you may learn about it, but generally speaking, this is high level, like graduate level knowledge, which is pretty impressive in and of itself. And and the level of detail is also quite complete. So when you perform an SEM analysis, you select a sample that's small enough to fit in the SEM chamber. I think that's a really good step number one. Clean the sample, and it even gives you the techniques. So, okay, interesting. So solvent cleaning, ultrasonic cleaning, ion milling, and then mount it, sputter coat it, transfer it, and then select the appropriate imaging mode, low resolution, high resolution. So, again, I think this goes back to how big of is the database and how complete is it? So this is a really impressive example. To me, it's less impressive than the problem solving example, because this is stuff that you can look up. It may be a little harder, it may be a little bit harder to look up, but it is available there. And I think this kind of also brings up a larger conversation and benefit here is the ability for the tool to be used in a way that can help you find answers quickly. Like, wouldn't you say so, Glenn?
I mean, absolutely. Like, I think this is the huge difference between like what currently exists, which is Google and YouTube, which are like some of the top two search engines right now for people, like just to put in any questions they have about how to learn something, how to do something, look up tutorials. Those are the go-to places. But this is the next evolution of that. I mean, when the internet came out, like Yahoo, Google, you can type something into a search bar. This is kind of how they felt, I would imagine. I mean, I was part of that as well. So, I mean, I have firsthand experience of how that felt. And then like YouTube, like added that element of like personability. Like you get to see somebody interact. You get to hear someone. They can do things on the screen that make it much more visual and more personable. This is at its early infancy for the next evolution, because, I mean, I would analogize or whatever, make the analogy that Google and the internet is kind of like a spider web. Like if I ask a question, it's just going to send me a list of all these different websites, and these websites are ranked with a great algorithm to put the best one in front of me. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But it's still from one individual source. It's not a crowdsourced single location. That address is like
right. There's
independently generated.
Right. There's a lot of different links that you can click. There's a lot of information to disseminate. Sometimes, even doing research, you have to read dozens of research papers to find the answer that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
I don't want to test it out too much here, but as you doing research in the material science domain requires sorting through a lot of different papers, and you have to read the papers to see, and sometimes only to find that the paper is not relevant to what you're looking at all, but you learn something in the process. So here it's almost a way to streamline that, which I kind of find really impressive. As if I want to know something, I can just query it, and it can give me the result right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things for to mention is that, like, even with that single web page or single source that I'm reading with an internet search, it is still a single source, single author, or even it could be written by multiple authors. It's still singular, and therefore it could have biases, it could have blind spots, and it could so it would require you having to do that effort manually on your part to be a good researcher, and to read multiple sources, and to digest that, and then aggregate that, and to come up with a kind of centralized model for yourself of all the things that you've downloaded. This kind of does that for you, in the sense that whatever it's trained on has that repository right now. And it probably has looked at multiple angles of the same topics, and it's condensing all of those sources into a singular truth. Because it could be very easily we write a blog post about how do you prepare a sample for SEM analysis. We are considered experts in our field, and we might have not left out a detail, like, oh, we forgot a step, or oh, it could be always save in high resolution because low resolution is not necessary or whatever, right? Like that could be totally something that we overlooked. And even if we're the top site for how to prepare samples for SEM, you're not going to get the best catered solution because it's just very biased. And this gives you a very centralized truth, and you can interact with it. That's one thing that a lot of like even YouTube and Google cannot do, which is like it has memory and you can interact with it. Like, hey, elaborate more on how big that SEM chamber is, or hey, what about if my sample is like whatever.
It's almost like a permanent live streamer where you can ask questions and it can respond to you. Yeah, I think the whole experience in and of itself is genius. The whole idea of it. And yeah, I can think of a million different uses for it. And I think it's really exciting and almost scary to think of the day that this is going to be like part of everybody's lives. And I almost think that's an inevitable transition. But because of the fact that it's online already, I think it's already easily accessible by anybody. I can pick it up from my pocket. But just the fact that this like the internet has already opened so much potential as far as connecting people, making information available to people. And now this is a tool that's available to everybody. And this infinite source of knowledge almost is streamlined to be delivered to you. Like yeah, I just find that so beautiful. Something about that is like really amazing and like really, really beautiful to me. And it's like before, if you think about it, I don't want to get too philosophical here. To learn things, you have to like go to the library, like you have to like go to the library and you have to like read books and and you have to pay for classes, and of course you still have to do that. But like we're kind of, it's amazing to see that we're kind of approaching a future where all this knowledge is like in the palm of your hands. And just something about that is just like really, really beautiful to me. Yeah, okay, anyways, so I want to do one more example. Glenn, I want to do the battery example that you talked about. I think that's cool. Another cool example, kind of in the vein of material science. And that kind of to test it out, its domain knowledge a little bit. But yeah, you said something.
Yeah. It's just like how do you like coat a electrode with your electrode slurry?
Yeah, you said something about composite batteries before, which kind of.
Well, the slurry is basically a composite of like your carbon coated material of your active material and some polymer gel to kind of also provide a good interface, give it that good consistency. That is a composition of mostly those three ingredients, like usually 80 10 10 or variations up to like 90. Commercially you can go up to like 96-98% of the active material. So, and then you just add the other things to give it more conductivity, more mechanical and properties. So, but that's a process that's like you got to read a paper. It's not something that you could easily Google, although it's not the most difficult thing to do. It's just a niche thing to do.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's hit retry.
I mean, I can imagine this as just being like, imagine a textbook, except you only have to use this now for all your classes in perpetuity. For the rest of your life, you don't have to buy a single textbook, and it's interactive. It's just it's a beautiful thought. I think the thing that always
Yeah,
overwhelmed me growing up is that like textbooks are very overwhelming and they're very bulky and they're especially in a multitasking environment culture, it's not something that is that inviting. The barrier to sitting down, focusing on a textbook nowadays is more and more uncommon and difficult, I would say. Not necessarily uncommon, but it's more difficult than it used to be. Our culture is not designed in that way with how technology is being used.
mhm.
But this is like so beautiful because I mean, when it's a textbook, I have to read that many pages. I'm looking at this thing, I'm like, dang, that's a lot of pages. That's a lot of text. It's a lot of time to like think about focusing. But if
Yeah.
I'm interacting with something now, it's in like digestible bits.
Okay, so I guess I'm not equipped to analyze this result, but what are your thoughts
Sure,
on
sure,
it?
sure. Let me review. So I think it's got like at a quick glance, it's got a lot of good things. Prepare a slurry by mixing the desired material in a container. Yeah. Use a stir mixer to ensure homogeneous, consistent suspension. That is definitely what you want. You want a homogeneous material because you don't want things aggregated and not mixing well together. Slurry may consist of a conductive material such as carbon and metal pieces suspended in liquid or paste. Uh, Clean the electrode surface to remove any contaminants or surface. Yes, definitely. So typically you use aluminum foil, very thin foil, or copper foil, depending on which electrode you're working with. And you need to just basically wipe it down, make sure it's a smooth surface before you deposit your slurry onto that. So this step of cleaning is definitely on par. Um, then you apply the surface using a spatula. Yep, that's basically what we do, depending on what tools you're using. But you can also just dump it in there. Allow the slurry to dry or cure. In my experience, we left it in a fume hood and covered it, and then just kind of let it slowly evaporate since it uses some toxic chemicals that have like very low vapor pressure or high vapor pressure. So basically, it'll readily evaporate even just in ambient like environments. And then insert the coated electrode to inspect it to ensure it's uniform. Yeah, and we usually do some post testing to like you can also like kind of use the foil after it's dry and with the slurry on it. You can like roll it across the bar or something like that to see like if it doesn't like break up or flake off and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So definitely steps that we do. We also bake it in an oven to further remove any moisture, which doesn't mention it, which is not necessarily part of the depositing step, but kind of more of the just like post processing. Yeah. So I mean, it does a great job, and it's very generalized. So it's not gonna doesn't tell you like specifics, for any type of
You're right, type of
chemicals or anything
materials.
like that. So,
Right, right.
but I mean, it's got the overview, and that's like especially from an introductory perspective, this is the right way to learn it right the first time. Like learning bad habits, I mean, I'm sure people have a lot of experiences, but if you learn something bad the first time, it takes a lot more extra effort to unlearn it and then reinsert the right method to correct that
Right.
misunderstanding. So,
I'm gonna play around with one more example related to research that is in a really esoteric and kind of specialized area. But I want to say, how does a electrochemical sweat sensor work? Uh, so again, I kind of want to emphasize that these are examples that I think that is hard to look up. These are very specialized fields that Glenn and I are talking about and working with. And like it's not to say that you can't look it up, but it's not easy. So okay, so here I had a really really small stint in working uh, a bio detection lab when I was at UCLA. But and yeah, this I am pretty impressed. So yeah, so basically I worked in a lab that dealt with electrochemical sweat sensors and the way that yeah, so you have three electrodes. Wow. So you have a working electrode, reference electrode, and counter electrode that are close to each other, and then it's coated with an enzyme that reacts to one or more electrolytes in sweat. Like, look, wow, holy moly. I'm just so impressed. As the electrolytes come into contact with the enzyme on the working electrode, they undergo electrochemical reaction, generating a current. And okay, so I'm really impressed with how brief of a answer this gave. Again, this is not a simple subject. This is not a not necessarily a topic that can be easily found online. Compounded by the fact that some research papers are behind paywalls. So you may find this in a research paper, but you may have to pay for the paper, or you won't have access to it. So that's kind of another aspect to it as well. But yeah, generally speaking, I'm just very impressed with how well it handled this very specific subject matter expertise. This is, yeah, and sensor can be calibrated to provide an absolute measure of electrolyte concentration. Yeah, I am pretty floored. I'm gonna ask
Do
it.
you want to try something fun with this? Can you
Sure.
say that again, but in the form of a rap in the style of Eminem?
Can you repeat your answer in the style of a rap? An electrochemical sweat sensor works with precision. So, again, there is no way that this exists, right? There is no way that this combination of texts exist. So,
This is where the creativity comes in.
right, exactly. So there is a creative, predictive aspect to it, because
this is honestly very, very, I mean, to any, like, I guess, person working in this community, I feel like at least I do. I will speak for myself. I won't say people in this community, but I find pleasure in like entertainment when it comes to things with like deals
science,
with your field of science, right? So I mean, like I would have like
an electrical
spent like
chemical.
probably hours trying to come up with this for fun, probably back in school, but like to have this at your fingertips and then like you could just perform this, like let's say like, with your friends, and they'd be like, "That shit's the ball." I can't say that, but like that's the ball, right?
An electrochemical sweat sensor works with precision to detect the electrolytes in perspiration. With the working electrode coated in enzyme, it measures the current and tells you what's inside. Oh my God. Like, and it's not random either. Like what's most impressive to me is this is functionally correct. Reference and counter electrodes provide the voltage and the ride to determine the concentration in units of moles or grams, and give you the info you need to optimize your fitness plans. Glenn, I am. Oh my God! This is so amazing. Like I can't understate like
Can you just type "do it again" in the style of Eminem?
I mean, okay? Do it. Like,
I saw someone do something where it says like "do it in the style of Eminem," and it was actually phenomenal. And maybe it may not be that different.
Yeah, I did it again. I mean, I'm like it made another rap. Like whether or not it's in the style of Eminem, I don't know. But I mean, it's electrochemical sweat sensor. What it does, it measures the electrodes in your perspiration. It's a plus.
I would say this one's not as good because the structure is just not.
Yeah, is where it's at.
The grammar is just a little
the
bit
circuit is intact.
throwing me off.
It measures the current, tells you what's inside, the concentration in units of moles or gram. It's no lie.
It's kind of weird. Like I don't feel like anybody talks that way.
I mean, music, the cadences can be rather unique, but anywho, okay, so I want to maybe spend a little bit more time with it, and I think we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay, so we played around with science stuff, we played around with coding stuff, we played around with let's ask it maybe some existential stuff. I don't think it does that really well. I mean, right? What is the meaning of life? I think with the more existential stuff, oh, interesting. Because there are some cases where Glenn and I have played with this where it gives you a hand wavy answer and says, "Oh, I can't definitively say, but you can look it up or find sources elsewhere or whatever." Um, but okay, interestingly, this is kind of it did give something that is tangible and kind of something with substance, I suppose. The meaning of life is a philosophical and existential question that has been debated and discussed by scholars and thinkers throughout history. It is a question that ultimately depends on individual beliefs and perspectives. There's no one definitive answer. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. Yeah, the purpose of happiness, fulfillment and contentment through personal experiences and relationships, search for understanding and knowledge, a desire to make a positive impact on the world and leave a legacy, search for higher purpose through religions. I think it covered like most ground, a lot of ground here. Pursuit of personal growth and development. Yeah,
I mean, if you make your response the universe, you're always going to be correct, right? So I
yeah,
mean, it's definitely like more specific than that, but I mean, it definitely takes a shotgun approach whenever it comes to very broad questions in general, like esoteric type of responses. It's I feel like we've seen before, it does a much better job at very technical, specific questions, but at a surface level. Another thing which is kind of off topic and um, that I find a great application for this in our current day and age where fake news and just a abundance of media, this does a good job at just like silencing the noise and just giving you very direct, unbiased answers about something. I would like to see this as a great avenue for news, essentially, if I want to understand what is a current event that's going on. Now, I can't do that as one of the limitations because its database is trained on previous data. Um, I think it specifically says not up to 2021, or basically up to 2021, it's decent, but not much further beyond that. But imagine this is something that could be used to a point where um, it can do things fairly real time, and even predictions for things. Now that can get very ethical into ethical issues, but imagine the fact that if we're trying to decide on a policy and we want to understand what is the truth right now, you have a lot of people on political spectrums both touting their own like their own truths,
right.
their own sources, but a lot of times you don't you can't rely on them. And this is a great potential way to have, you know, put
Yeah,
theoretically unbiased, sources for your news.
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, like you said, don't want to dive too much into politics, but different news channels can present information in certain ways that are biased towards certain political ideologies. I don't disagree with that. Um, I think you said something there. I may have misheard, but like as far as like tell you what to do, tell you what's the best thing, I think like there's a difference between presenting information in an unbiased manner and tell you what the best solution is. I think
Mm,
I think those are two very, very different conversations. So like um, you know, like I guess there are certain things like political ideologies, for one, I think, people because of people's values, people personal beliefs, for example, if I ask it, is abortion right or wrong? Right? I'm confident it won't give me an answer. Is abortion right or wrong? It may say exactly what I said. It's yeah, exactly. So let's just say um there's no one definitive answer. So I think for the, when it comes to morality, yeah, I think I don't think I think AI will stay away from that. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if there's a place for AI to say, hey, like, okay, there's probably some stuff like they don't kill people, stuff like that. Okay, but you bring up an interesting point, and I wonder if there's a precedence for AI in things like the legal system, right? In things like, you know, this point is tangentially related, but you know, my fiance and I have been watching a lot of like true crime, and a lot of these true crime documentaries and stuff. You know, ultimately, you're as a defendant, as a prosecutor, your lawyer is trying to convince your jury, and your jury is ultimately like the one that decides whether you're guilty or not, which I find a fascinating process, because there's biases in that process, right? Like I wonder, you know, I'm curious to see if there will be a place for using AI, like, hey, based on these facts, based on these facts, based on these events, based on these witness testimonies, you're either guilty or you're wrong, right? Like there's no opinion involved, right? It's just true fact. But yeah, that I think is an interesting aspect. But anyways, okay. So actually, there's one more thing I want to test out. I think we did some research and said that this can be used for healthcare, right? What are some good examples of that? I don't think I've come across them, but maybe you know more.
Well, I feel like same thing with when it comes to either like law or healthcare. I feel like there's similar paradigms where there's a huge repository of historical data, and if you need to search something, like let's say people use WebMD, they can get themselves lost very far, very quickly. But this, I feel like you could really interact with it, tell it like I have this, what about this, and it can you could be used in that way. I had actually had my wife try this last night. You know, like hey, imagine like you're one of your patients, go through this and then like use their responses and like see if they would respond with something that you would say as a provider. And for the most part it's very good at like general responses is what her feedback was. But for very specific things like hey, how do you suture, right? Like it tells you the general process but it doesn't tell you what to do in like a very specific situation, like what tools to use or like you know, how do you perform that thing. Like you're still going to want some things to supplement that in the future, but I think it's kind of like what we said, very good at general broad overviews.
Okay, let's just do one test. So uh, what drug should I take for headaches? Okay, so it
I have a headache, what could it be caused from?
okay. I have a headache. Yeah, I mean this is pretty good. It's pretty good. So okay, I guess I'll just finish it off with some rapid fire things and just kind of try to make it seem like a conversational. Wow, how are you?
You can ask it, has the temperature been increasing, like average temperature around the world been increasing annually?
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good question. I want to ask it a slightly different way. Is global warming real? Wow, I like how it starts with yes. Okay, so can you give me some stats? Sure. Oh, wait. Okay. Oh, okay. Interesting. So how
This
about
time it didn't do it relevant to that. Yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting.
some stats regarding global warming. I mean, you know, kind of back to the topic of education and how this could be used as like a cheat code. Like I could, if I'm doing a research paper, I could just use this, right? And I mean, I'll have to like cite the sources and all that, but you know, I find this kind of an invaluable tool for disseminating information. I know we said that again and again, but I just don't think that should be understated. I think this is
Mhm.
uh, a
I got
really
another.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I finished that thought.
I got another Pokemon reference for today's episode, which is this is essentially the Pokedex.
Mhm. Probably even better because the
Much
Pokédex
better.
won't tell you uh the details of the Pokemon until you see it, right?
Exactly.
Until you catch it, right? I mean,
I mean, I don't remember the details, but it's like,
anyways, yeah, no, okay. Yeah, I think we can end it there unless there's something else you wanted to show and talk about. Um, because I think you played around with it probably a lot more than I did.
I'm going to continue to play around with this. Like, I basically envision myself already using this on a day-to-day basis, as long as it's available. Um, to just go about my tasks. Like today, I bought some new tools and I like tested to see like, oh, how would you use this? You know, what are the ways this like tool works? You know, I bought a car powered. You know, you plug it into your car charger, and it can power a tire pump, and it can pump your four tires. So I just kind of like checked like, hey, like how are these things done and how does this work, and does a good job of doing that. And I love how like concise and that interaction between you and basically whatever decades, hundreds of years of text data that exist in this training data set, whatever it's been used, but like it's basically an aggregate of human consciousness and you can singularly interact with this. So
Right.
it's the next level of our human
Yeah.
civilization.
See, I think I don't see myself using it. Well, actually, once for more programmatic tasks, I may work with it a little bit more. Um, I guess for now, when I do programmatic tasks, I like to figure it out on my own first. Um, but like now that I know that this works, I'm actually going to start using this instead of Stack Overflow. Because in Stack Overflow, I Google a lot of programming related things. Sometimes I just forget. I'll be like, how do you find a substring in a Python data frame? Um, and then okay, yes, as str dot contains is like the exact syntax. Sometimes I'll just like forget like random small things. And again, my typical approach is it takes me to Stack Overflow and then to find a question that may not even be related and kind of see a answer that is somewhat related to what I'm asking and be like, okay, hey, I found my question there. And again, depending on the complexity of the question, this is just a simple example, but it can take me it can waste like half an hour, right, of my time. And so I see this as a tool that I could potentially use to make myself more productive. So that's kind of really exciting. But I think, when it will really take off is when it starts adding stuff like images. I I'd be really impressed once it starts getting to that level. Like
And video.
and video, like WikiHow. Like I don't have an example off the top of my head, but like I know sometimes when you ask the internet for a question, like I like how WikiHow will have these cartoon figures. You know what I'm talking about? Those like tutorials, they have like these cartoon figures that say, okay, like this is how you perform the Heimlich maneuver, on a child or something, right? And like it'll show you images. Um, I think like people for learning, like people nowadays still need visual aid. Like when you go to a class, the professor, especially in STEM classes, they'll like draw stuff on the whiteboards and stuff. Um, so I think for more higher level education, stuff like that, with that the stuff that needs visual aid, is going to be a challenge for this. But again, I think it's a small step in the right direction. So I mean, this is their first official. I mean, to my knowledge, they probably released earlier versions of this, but as a viral, worldwide release of this kind of as a V1, I think that they did, they're doing a damn good job. Yeah, and like OpenAI
I
is
mean,
gonna
there's also a
start.
huge community of people who go to Reddit to ask Reddit, ask whatever. There's so many subreddits for different things.
Mhm.
This completely replaces that because you get, a lot of experts in their specific fields, and then you can go to their subreddit and you can ask them and they can respond to you. This does that in real time. It's think about how many problems that's going to solve or how many
Right,
questions get answered.
right,
It's just
exactly, and right,
it's insane.
it's exactly. So anyways, I'm gonna stop the sharing now, and
Okay.
maybe well, if you wanna give some closing thoughts, I think we actually gave most of them already. Yeah, overall, I think it's really powerful, really interesting, powerful tool. I think there are a lot of different ways of using it and a lot of ways that this could improve people's lives. And yeah, excited to see where it goes. And so that's our episode for today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining. Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.